Bye, Robbie. Sorry, I don't know why you're still there. Today's a little squirrely. Rumble Studio, which I'm trying to run, is not doing a great job. John Kiriakou is here. I'm Ted Rall. I'm here too. The Rumble feed is a little squirrely. So if you guys are joining us on Rumble, thanks for being here. I do see some of you guys, so I'm hoping that you guys have figured it out. We had to drop one of the feeds. YouTube seems to be running good, so we will see what happens there. John, thanks for joining us from across the big sea. So lots to talk about today. Donald Trump, our president, is apparently not dead and decided to provide proof of life. We'll talk about that and what that means. Over the weekend, news dump, the Washington Post dumped this extraordinary U.S.-Israeli PDF plan, 38-page plan to basically ethnically cleanse Gaza, and exactly what the details of that would look like. It's a big scoop for the Post, but unfortunately they decided to bury it over the weekend, over the holiday weekend on top of that. But we'll get into the details of that. Eric Trump, not a big shock, wants to be the president. He's the one who is on SNL, little buddy. Can
I interrupt you on that? Funny thing too is I sent you an email saying, or a text message, whatever it was, saying Donald Jr. according to The Hill, but not Donald Jr. Eric. Eric. Where'd that come from?
Well, he's the smart one. So, yeah. Okay. Anyway, so we'll get into that. Hey, look, these days anything's possible. And an old CIA MK Ultra side project from San Francisco is back in the news. We'll get into that. And I love this story. I'm looking forward to talking to you about it. I really was taken aback when China's President Xi was trying to basically say that, China and communist China and Russia kind of had similar roles defeating fascism in the Axis during World War II. And I don't know what history books he reads, but that's not the one I read. Not to say that the Chinese didn't have their hands full during that period, but we should get into that because it's really interesting and what it means. So, John, what do you want to talk about first? Shall we talk about the president's not dead?
Yeah, of course, I've been in Iceland the last few days, so I was a little bit out of touch. And then I start getting text messages from friends of mine saying, do you think Trump is really dead? I'm like, what? What's that all about? So I go straight to Fox News thinking if Trump is dead, they would be the first ones, self-flagellating. There's nothing. Then there's nothing on CNN. There's nothing on the Washington Post, on the New York Times. So I Google it, and an article pops up from the Hindustan Times saying Trump may be dead. People are talking about it on Twitter, and there are hashtags, Trump is dead. And another one is Trump dead? I'm like, what the heck is this all about? So I called a friend of mine who follows these things, and she's like, yeah, it looks like Trump might be dead. And I said, no, that's not how it works in the United States. Other countries might hide the fact that their leaders have died. I told a story about, Mao being dead for weeks before the Chinese finally admitted that he was dead. But then you start seeing these AI-generated pictures of Trump with, rotting teeth and Trump with a black eye. And then there are rumors that he had a stroke over the weekend. It's like, no, none of it's true.
Well, Keith Olbermann.
Please, Keith Olbermann.
Keith Olbermann tweeted like, well, I just can't imagine Trump not having anything to say for days at a time. There's something there. Mm-hmm. There's a report that a couple of garbage bags went out the second floor window of the White House earlier today. And I was wondering if Trump might have been having marital problems. We know how that is. Melania tossing his shit out the window.
Why would Melania, do you think, go to Walter Reed and tour the OBGYN area? Why would she do that?
It's a good question.
And people are saying, oh, it was cover. It was cover because she was visiting Trump. He had a stroke and he's in there secretly. And it's like, no, he's not.
Well, I mean, look, I'm going to lay, the Trumpies are going to be happy to hear me say this. I'm going to lay this at the feet of Joe Biden, like the way every administration likes to blame the past. But I think this is true this time, right? I mean, the Democrats and Joe Biden, and we interviewed Jake Tapper here to talk about it, a few months ago, basically tried to convince us that all was well with Joe Biden for 4 years. And now, of course, obviously, we know our lying eyes were pretty much telling us the truth, and we're, and so I think that's going to happen a lot. Like, I mean, the American people were lied to about the state of President, Wilson, President Eisenhower, and it's happened at other times. But there's never been anything like as astounding and prolonged and extreme as the Biden 3.5-year cover-up of his mental state that all became clear when he presented himself at the Trump presidential debate. I think that's what this is about. I think ever since that happened, we are like those other countries, John. We just can't really believe anything. We're not going to trust that, if the president's gone for 36 hours, that it doesn't mean something just like he wants to have some me time.
Yeah. Man, I was watching the BBC here. It's funny, in hotels in Iceland, the BBC is the only English language channel. It's all Icelandic channels. Like, the country only has 400,000 people in it. How many TV channels all in Icelandic? Anyway, that's just me complaining. So I'm watching the BBC today, and it's like the whole day on BBC, it was, is Trump dead? Did Trump have a stroke? Why was Melania at Walter Reed Hospital? I hadn't heard about the thing coming out of the window, but they too laid this at the feet of Joe Biden, because this is now, as you just said, what we come to expect from our leaders. So who knows? Who knows? I will say that both Politico and The Hill are very happy to be coming out with their top 10 lists of potential candidates, and some of them are nuts, and some of them we're going to be talking about for the next 3 years.
Well, Gavin Newsom, speaking of whom, his stock just increased dramatically today with this court ruling out of Los Angeles. He's the one who filed this suit against the nationalization, the federalization of the California National Guard in LA, and he won at the, obviously the Trump can and probably will appeal to the Supreme Court, but I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen there. I suspect the Supreme Court will not hear the case and leave this decision standing.
I think you're right. And Governor, is it JB or JD Pritzker? Now I'm having a mental blank. Anyway, the governor of Illinois, JB Pritzker, the heir to the Hyatt hotel fortune, has learned a lesson from Gavin Newsom and is doing the same thing now in Illinois that Newsom had been doing to go after Trump about these National Guard deployments and ICE raids and all this other stuff. Seeing now with this appellate court decision overturning Trump's policy that you can fight Trump and actually win. And with Pritzker trying to break out of the pack of at least a dozen Democrats being considered as presidential candidates now, and knowing he's going to have to take on Newsom, the gloves are already off.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, I still have this thing, though. The internet and TV are visual media. I don't see Pritzker winning. I mean, frankly, he's just not telegenic enough. I mean, that's just code for ugly.
I don't see Shapiro winning either. He was quite high on the list that ran in the Hill. But this is a guy who served in the military, not the American military, the Israeli military. And I'm sorry, but I'm not voting for somebody who volunteered to fight in the Israeli military.
Nor am I. And I'm not. And look, he is a very fierce supporter of the genocide in Gaza. And look, that's an unpopular genocide right now. I don't think it's going to age particularly well as the bodies are dug up next year, and the year after that. I mean, can you imagine, John, how the world is going to be judging Israel and those who supported it, 3 years from now? It's not going to be pretty. I mean, there's not going to be any avoiding any of this. This isn't going to be like George W. Bush, sort of coasting to re-election, even though no WMDs were found in 2004. This is going to be like George W. Bush's approval ratings in 2008. John, you're a little bit frozen there. At least for me. I don't know if you hear me. Robbie, do you see John?
I see him, but he is froze.
Okay. All right, John, if you hear us, you're a little frozen here.
That's the official Southern term.
At least Robbie's John's in at least, it's not like with your mouth open, like.
Yeah, it always helps.
Okay. John, please reboot maybe and rejoin, and I'll be waiting here for you.
But, in all fairness, I understand why this happens whenever as you know, I'm a right winger, and I get into it with a lot of other right wingers. And the fact that so many, especially Republicans, are willing to give somebody a pass who served in a foreign military is insane to me. Because if it's for any other country except for Israel, it would be torches, pitchforks, this guy's a traitor and everything else. But it's perfectly okay not only to serve in the military of a foreign country, but then to wear that uniform in the Congress.
Sorry, guys. Sorry about that.
Hey, it happens.
Connection here.
All right, Robbie, you can finish your thought, and then we'll put you back on.
Thanks for bailing me out, Robbie.
Oh, hey, that's what I'm here for. No, I'm just talking. It's just crazy. Like that schmuck down in Florida. It's a special kind of stupid. Not only to wear the uniform of a foreign military in the Congress, but then for the people to continue to vote for the schmuck who wears the foreign uniform in the Congress. If you get pissed off about Zelensky and his Ukrainian flag in the Capitol, this is worse.
Yeah,
has the Israeli flag in the hallway outside of his Senate office. The Israeli flag.
Ridiculous.
It kind of makes you wonder which country he's representing, doesn't it?
Who's wondering? Anyway, all right. Thanks, Robbie. We'll bring you back if and when. Okay, so I guess that's a nice segue, John. Let's talk about this 38-page document that came out. This is one of the most disgusting things I've ever read. Now, I have to say, I want to be clear here, John. You know very well from your work that there are plans for everything floating around White Houses and government offices. There's a plan for if Belgium and Luxembourg attack the U.S., how will we respond? There's a plan for giant space bugs invading the United States. There's a plan for everything. Okay, so with that caveat, right, this does seem a lot like something that we saw in that Trump video, the Gaza Riviera video from a few months ago. This 38-page prospectus called, this starts The Great Trust. The GREAT is an acronym for the Gaza Reconstitution, Economic Acceleration, and Transformation Trust. Reading directly from the document. From a demolished Iranian proxy to a prosperous Abrahamic ally. And it's the goal, a thriving Gaza at the crossroads of a new Abrahamic architecture. The risk, Gaza is an Iranian outpost in a moderate part of the region that will threaten IMEC Abrahamic architecture and undermine any future Palestinian self-governance. The opportunity, Gaza is a regional trade hub at the crossroads of the ancient sea route, Egypt to Gaza to Babylon, and the incense trade route, India to Yemen to Arabia to Europe. It can thrive once again at the center of pro-American regional architecture. John, I don't understand the word architecture in this context. Do you?
No. Listen, this is the definition of ethnic cleansing.
It is.
It's literally the definition of ethnic cleansing. This group that this was in the Washington Post today that came out and said that the Israelis are ethnically cleansing Gaza. they raised 5 different points, and their conclusion is, I mean, it's almost too sick to even consider, but it's that the sorry, I seem to have lost my, there I am. They said that if you meet one criterion, right, then that's ethnic cleansing. The Israelis meet all 5 criteria for ethnic cleansing. How the European countries aren't jumping up and down about this today, it's a mystery to me. And then I'm ashamed to say even the Greek government came out and said, we will stand with Israel if it is the last country on, it's like, what are you guys doing? I mean, I understand you hate the Turks and the Turks hate the Israelis, so now you love the Israelis. I get it. But do you have to be joined at the hip with the Israelis too? It makes me ashamed.
So one detail that leapt out at me, and I'm sure it did to you too, John, is that in order to compensate victims of ethnic cleansing who would be thrown out of their ancestral homeland of Gaza, they would receive $5,000 American dollars.
Unbelievable.
$5,000
to give up I mean, we're talking about your homeland for the last 2,000 plus years. You're going to walk away for $5,000. Now, of course, I don't have to fight Israelis every day and risk getting shot to death for the crime of standing in line for food and clean water. So I shouldn't judge, but $5,000, I'd rather be dead.
Me too. And I suspect a lot of people over there are going to agree with that. And also I thought it was interesting that neither the Israeli nor the U.S. government nor the Trump administration specifically denied that they were taking this plan seriously. Nobody said, we're not going to do this. We deny this, or even the weasel words of a typical Washington denial, which is we have no such plans, which could mean we're thinking about it, but we haven't decided to pull the trigger yet. They're not even making that kind of denial.
Yeah, you're right. They're not even making they're not making any kind of denial. And
No.
It's amazing to me that even Donald Trump, who granted is known for his pro-Zionism, would go so far as to risk being called an ethnic cleanser for the rest of eternity. History's not going to smile on this.
No, not at all. Not at all. So this seems to have been the fever dream of some tech bros, right? It kind of really reads like that. And it has a lot of jargon. Like, what's with this Abrahamic thing?
Yes.
I mean, by the way, Muslims are Abrahamic.
They are Abrahamic. Yes.
So
exactly.
I mean, most Gazans are either Christian or Muslim. So therefore, everyone there is Abrahamic. And then they have these, it's just this whole we're going to make this super modern, and there's all these crazy charts in here, $24 billion in direct revenue within 10 years by the year 2035. Levers to reduce the trust's investment. I'm reading directly from the report. Increase the number of Gazans who volunteer to leave Gaza during the reconstruction. Increase the percentage of PPP investments and or expand the categories where those investments are used. Public land can be used as collateral. Public land, this land doesn't belong to anyone but the people of Gaza and a future Palestinian state. PPP stands for Public-Private Partnership Investment.
Right.
So, they're talking about they're talking about how they have companies that they claim are already interested in doing this, including IKEA and the Arabian Construction Company. And they have a lot of emphasis on broadband, tourism, all this. Gazans permanently relocating is an important bullet point. 90,000 families, 500,000 people by year 10 minimum. Each family will receive will receive $55,000 in relocation package, plus subsidized rent for 4 years. I mean, it's very detailed. I encourage everybody to go over to the Washington Post and read it, or see if you can, if you're not a subscriber, see if you can find a reprint somewhere online. But this is exactly what genocide is. This is ethnic cleansing, and I just thought it was fascinating. Just to see just how and this according to the Washington Post, I should say, this has been making the rounds in the White House. This is a quote from the Post. People familiar with the trust planning and with the administration deliberations over post-war Gaza spoke about the sensitive subject on condition of anonymity. The White House referred questions to the State Department, which declined to comment. On Wednesday, Trump held a meeting to discuss ideas for how to end the war, and the participants apparently all discussed this plan. Apparently, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which has been, of course, shooting the people who are coming to try to get food, are also, are deeply involved in this. It's all part of this. It's extremely detailed, and that's the part that's just so frightening.
It makes me sick to my stomach. I've been yelling for years about the Turkish occupation of the northern 1/3 of Cyprus. I would volunteer to fight if the Turks tried to throw out the rest of the Cypriots from the southern 2/3 of the island, as an example. And they can take their $5,000 and shove it up their rear ends.
No doubt.
If I were Palestinian, like I said a minute ago, I would rather fight to the death. I really would.
John Killer Rabbit 123 over on Rumble is asking us, and thank you very much for the generous $10 donation. What do you think of Israel's admiration of the terrorists who founded Israel, but hypocrisy towards Palestinian terrorism? As a Brit, I despise all terrorists, but it must complicate their stance, or not?
That is a great question. The Israelis, well, before there was an Israel, the Zionists, led by Menachem Begin, I might add, carried out acts of terrorism, including the bombing of the King David Hotel in Jerusalem that killed dozens of British soldiers. And yet they're not described as terrorists. They're described as freedom fighters. So I guess it's all in the eye of the beholder. If you're a supporter of Zionism, then the Israelis are liberating Gaza, I suppose. But for the rest of the world, this is an act of genocide.
Why do you think the Washington Post decided to run such a incredibly spicy topic on a holiday weekend?
Yeah,
when very few people would pay attention.
That they did. Right, and maybe that was it, Ted, because they know that people are busy over the holiday weekend. They're not going to read the article, and then at the same time they could say, well, we did run the article, so you can't blame us for being pro-Israeli. It's
a dutiful release, and I guess that would probably reflect internal contradictions within the within the Post.
Yeah.
John, question for you from Phrasmataz over on Rumble. John, do you think the Turkish occupied Cyprus and the Greek majority of Cyprus could ever cooperate on the issue of Israeli land developers doing a land grab in both regions?
Or just take on their own and similar strategies. Turks are talking about expropriation of Israeli land on national security grounds. Honestly, I think it's all talk. I don't think the Turks have the guts to go after Israeli land, just like the Greek Cypriots don't have the guts to go after land that the British military still occupies. Why does Rumble always freeze when I'm looking my absolute worst? Yeah, I don't see anything like that happening, Fraz. I think that, I hate to say this, especially about the Greek government, but I think the Greeks, the Turks, the Israelis are all equally guilty of foregoing anything that could be seen as a good long-term policy in favor of, a quick short-term grab. It's sickening. Okay. And I'll tell you what else really makes me mad. I generally don't read comments on newspaper articles because I don't care, really. But I have been reading the comments in the Greek papers about what's happening in Gaza. And the Greeks, by a slight majority, favor the Palestinians. That's new. Well, what's new is that the majority is small. It used to be, 80% of the Greeks supported the Palestinians. But the Greeks see a real long-term financial benefit to throwing their lot in with the Israelis. And it's just so disheartening to see people commenting on these newspaper articles, people with Greek names. It's like, have you forgotten what the Turks did to us? Have you forgotten that we were their slaves for 450 years? And you're gonna throw your lot in with the Israelis, knowing what the Turks did?
John, even as a cynical former banker, I don't think it's good business. I mean, Israel's stock is a short sell if there ever was one. I mean, Israel's on the fucking way out. I mean, the whole world is cutting them loose. Just today, Belgium decided to announce that they're going to recognize Palestine. UN General Assembly is going to happen here in New York very soon. It's going to be just one thing after another. We recognize Palestine. Us too. Hey, we're in too. Everybody's going to. And Belgium went further. They announced sanctions. Now, they're symbolic, but still sanctions against Israel. And against the settlers in the West Bank and all that. It's a big deal.
It is.
Are you kidding? In 2 years, no one, in Greece or anywhere else, is making any money with or for or from the Israelis. The Israelis are going to have their hands full. They're going to be cut off by the U.S. by 2028. I'm convinced of it. Or they're going to be on the way to that.
Oh, I hope you're right. But, you look at the Democrats, and the Democrats are no better than the Republicans on this. I keep coming back to that picture of Cory Booker, like running to get into the picture with Netanyahu when he was last in Washington, but then just in case, trying to duck behind Senator Klobuchar so that he's kind of obscured. It's like, buddy, pick a side, because you're doing the wrong thing twice here. If you're going to be with the Israelis, then by God, be with the Israelis and own it.
I don't think there's any future in it. Even if you were, honestly, I would tell you that even if you're a pro-Israeli person, even if you love it, you're a total Zionist, I'd be like, you should distance yourself from those guys. If I were your political advisor, it's like, it's not going to look good.
Yep. Hey, MW Knox 185. Thank you very much for the donation. And Sodan 2324. Thank you both for the donation and for being on my surveillance class today. We got two questions, Ted. Hi, John. Hi, Ted. I know I brought this up last week, but the U.S. just sank a Venezuelan vessel allegedly carrying drugs. Is the prerequisite for a strategic strike in Venezuela? Russia and China have been really quiet. That's an important question. And MW Knox says, I bet the Gaza rebuild contract goes to Saudi bin Laden group. I bet you're right. And then we're going to have to pretend there's nothing wrong with that, just like with Jolani in Syria. Oh, my God. I think you're both absolutely right. What do you think, Ted?
No, I think that's totally right. And we have to, of course, obviously, the bin Laden family is not Osama bin Laden, obviously. No. Although obviously he was a bin Laden, but still, the Gaza, that's been the talk, right? Like the UAE and the Saudis would be rebuilding Gaza, and they're not going to do that as a gift to the people of Palestine. It's not like the Palestinians are going to be. Let's put it this way, right? An interesting way to look at this, like a Rubik's Cube, is to turn it around and look at it from another point of view. Imagine a different world. Imagine a world where Israel and the U.S. and everyone else says, okay, enough. The madness has passed. Hamas is gone. We're going to rebuild Gaza and basically make it nice for the Palestinians. Well, how would that look? How would you do that, right? Well, you would have to relocate them temporarily. It would be kind of like after the big earthquake in Turkey 25 years ago, where people had to move out of Istanbul and live in these massive tent cities out in the outskirts and the suburbs, and then they'd be able to come back home later. So how would that look? I mean, they would have to live in Israel proper. You couldn't move them to Egypt because there would always be the danger the Israelis would not let them back in. So they'd have to move to the Negev or whatever. They'd live in tent cities for probably 5 years or more while all the unexploded ordnance is found and all the buildings are, basically you need everything from scratch, right? New sewage, new electricity, everything. Rebuild all the buildings. That's going to take billions of dollars. And then, imagine rebuilding Manhattan from the ground up. That's what we're talking about.
Literally.
So it's literally the same size and same population as Manhattan. So then, then they're allowed to come home. Well, why would the Saudis or the Emiratis or anyone else do this unless they were compensated in some way? Just to be nice? I'm not usually a person who thinks much about like the poor Saudis, but why should the Saudis fix it? They didn't bomb the shit out of it. Why should the Emiratis do it? It's not their fault. It's the Israelis who did it. So why are they going to do it? The only reason they would do it is if they could make a profit. There's no other way. And that profit motive means the Palestinians can't be there. The Israelis they've been living, with ethnic cleansing in the West Bank. They know that the facts on the ground tend to win, right? Possession is 9/10 of the law. You go in there, you kick people out, and then you're there. And it's hard for the world to say, get these fucking settlers out of there. They don't belong there. Although that's the truth. They're squatters, right? It's like if squatters move into my apartment while I'm on vacation, I can call the NYPD and get their ass thrown out. But the point is, but that's exactly what should happen to the Israelis who are in the West Bank. So similarly, they're gonna, they're like, well, we'll just bomb the shit out of Gaza, and then these people they'll have to leave, and then it'll be ours. It will be ours. That was always their idea. And and I don't blame them because it's always worked before.
I agree. And, I hear a lot of people, I have to be careful the way I word this because I don't want anybody to take it incorrectly. I hear a lot of people saying, what did Hamas think was going to happen? Like on October 7th, did they think the Israelis would just fold like a house of cards?
No, they didn't think that.
We're going to live happily ever after?
They did
not.
What
did they think the response was going to be? And I'm not condoning it. This is genocide.
No, they knew that. Look, I think Hamas knew exactly what was going to happen, and I think that if they had to go back to October 6th, they would do the same exact thing because it worked in their. It accomplished what they were trying to accomplish. They were trying. The people of Gaza, they were locked behind this security wall, and the key was thrown away, and nobody gave a shit about them. And the world had completely forgotten. The world, the Saudis were moving toward normalization with Israel. The Abraham Accords, blah blah. The Palestinians' problem was considered like under wraps and vacuum packed and sealed. And I think I think Hamas leadership, they were like, we need a game changer. And we have to put ourselves on the top of the headlines. We've got to make news. And the Israelis are going to be monsters, but that's what terrorism is for. What was the message of Al Qaeda on 9/11? The message was the Americans are imperialist monsters, anti-Muslim, and expansionist and imperialistic and hegemonic. How do we expose that? We get them to overreact and invade not one but two Muslim countries who had nothing to do with it. It's like Al Qaeda wins. Their message is out. It's like Hamas's message. The Israelis are monsters. They're a bunch of racist assholes. They're murderous and genocidal. You don't believe us? Here, we'll show you. Poke, 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 poke. They attacked. The Israelis played it, and the Americans after 9/11 played into the hands of the terrorists. The terrorists got exactly what they wanted.
Yes. And we've got a question too. It's an interesting one. I actually just had to look it up real quickly. This is from Zara Ova. Why have hospitals in France reportedly been told to begin preparing for a major military engagement on the continent, and NATO spending is projected to exceed $1.6 trillion this year? The second part of the question is easy. $1 trillion of that is ours. So 1.6 trillion, I think, is probably lower than it could have been. But I hadn't heard about hospitals in France being told to prepare for a major military engagement. So I looked it up, and that it is true. Hospitals in France have been told by the Ministry of Health to begin to brace for a major engagement by March 2026, with chilling instructions to be ready to treat a flood of wounded troops from across the continent. The French government believes that the war in Ukraine will devolve seriously, and that France is going to have to absorb hundreds of battlefield casualties per day. Now, it's unclear to me, and this is from the British media. It's in the Sun, it's in the Mirror, it's all over the place. It's unclear to me if this is a training exercise or what, but it goes on to say the ministry bluntly admitted, quote, "It is therefore a question for our health system of anticipating the care of military patients in the civilian health system. And while Paris frames this as a major engagement, the reality is actually far starker. Under NATO's Article 5, of course, if France were attacked or if Russian troops stormed into any allied nation, the whole alliance would be pulled in. That's why everybody's been so careful not to engage, for example, Poland, right? Or if the Russians send a drone over Poland and it's seen in Germany or shot down in Germany or whatever was the case last week, the Russians just deny it. Say, oh, it was, some hobbyist, or it was a Ukrainian drone or whatever. Lulu3 comments, Macron, the drama queen. That's what I'm going to hang my hat on, because Macron is a drama queen, especially when it comes to Ukraine. Nobody else is preparing for this World War III to begin in March. So maybe it's just Macron, Ted, maybe he was watching the show last week and heard what you said about his electoral chances. So maybe he's trying to drum something up. I don't know. I don't know what to make of this.
The French are never above ginning up a little bit of drama. By the way, this is off topic, but I can't resist. Frasmataz is talking about a video that he saw. I saw this also about feral cats becoming pets at the state pen in Kentucky. Looked like a great program, except the prisoners have to pay for the cat food and other care. Any thoughts on this as a prison civil rights guy, John? So these cats cut down on yard fights. No one wants to go into solitary and leave their cat alone.
Hey, I know it's probably farther off topic, but there was an article in Kathimerini, which is like the New York Times. Actually, it's the New York Times sister paper in Greece. They have the Times insert every day. There was an article yesterday about cats. If you've ever been to Greece, there are like millions and millions of cats. They're everywhere. Greece doesn't have any rats because it has all these cats. Mm-hmm. And it was saying in this article that now there are 24 different like humanitarian pet adoption organizations in Greece, where if you go to Greece on vacation and you have this great time and you see a cat and you love the cat, you can take the cat with you and go home, right? You have to pay for like a rabies shot or whatever.
Sure.
So you can take the cat and just go home. Sure enough, Curtis Sliwa says yesterday that he wants to begin importing European stray cats into New York because the rats are so brazen that even in Central Park, they're climbing up carriages into the carriage where the baby is there sleeping or napping or whatever.
There's video. Yeah.
To eat snacks that the mothers have in the carriages. So
yeah, the cats used to be in the subway, confined to the tracks. You'd see them.
Right.
Now they're up on the platforms, broad daylight.
Disgusting.
It is, there's a really interesting cat story. Under Grand Central Station, there's a warren of switching yards that goes hundreds of feet down where the trains switch. And for years, there were feral cats that were down there that kept the rat population down. But then the ASPCA, some do-gooders came in and rescued all the cats and cleared them out. And in no time, track workers were starting to get bitten by rats all the time. And they begged for the cats to be allowed to come back, and they finally did. And so as far as I know, that's still standing. Look, as a cat lover, anything that puts more cats on the streets of New York is something that I can get behind. I just would feel sad if they were run over by cars, which would probably happen too.
Yes.
But I mean, it's, look, honestly, I think it's a pleasure. I know I don't want to say anything nice about the Turks, John, but one of the great pleasures of visiting Istanbul is all the cats too. You could go to a public park and, a cat will just jump on your lap and you could make friends with it. Same, obviously it's the same in Greece. It's all the Mediterranean countries kind of like cats.
And no rats, which is wonderful.
And you're ratless.
Adam Fighter has a good question. By the way, John, what's happening in Greece? 700 schools are shutting down because of the demographic crisis. There was a great article today. I forget where I saw it, if it was in one of the Greek papers, wherever it was, saying that Greece has the greatest population drain of any European country and one of the biggest population drains in the world, that in the next 30 years, it's expected to lose 24% of its population.
Whoa.
People are just leaving. They're going to the US, UK, Canada, Australia, mostly. A lot are going to Germany. But they've got to get out of Greece because there's just no future there. It's a major brain drain.
That sucks. Big Boss Bob Ross. Yeah, no, I don't. I totally agree with your mom not being impressed with your suggestion of His Excellency Muammar Gaddafi. Although my cat is also named after a world leader, the first king of France, King Clovis. He's not king though. John, Luke wants to know any elements of 9/11 that you wish were answered. I'll answer mine. Oh, yeah. There's one big one for me, which is United Flight 93. According to the 9/11 Commission report, Cheney gave the shoot down order, in my view, correctly. And according to the timeline in the report, there was more than enough time for Air National Guardsmen to intercept Flight 93. The engine was reportedly found 12 miles away from the crash site, even though it was a straight down crater. So my question is, was Flight 93 actually shot down successfully by the Air Force? If so, that would be one of the things the government did well that day. And but I would understand why they didn't reveal it. That's my big one. How about you?
That's a good one. I have several actually. I want to know why the Pentagon never released the rest of the video from all the cameras around the Pentagon. We've got the video from the Exxon station over on Columbia Pike, which doesn't tell us very much. There were dozens of cameras all around the Pentagon, if not more than dozens. And I want to know why that video was never released, because it gives rise to conspiracy theories that it was a missile. There was a woman I was talking to at a speech that I gave. Woman was like in her 70s, and she told me with a completely straight face that she believes that the plane that hit the Pentagon actually did not hit the Pentagon, that it landed at an Air Force base in Norfolk, Virginia. Everybody was taken off the plane, and they were executed in a gas chamber on the airbase, and their bodies were incinerated. And then the Air Force shot a missile into the Pentagon so that we would have an excuse to go to war. And I said, ma'am, with all due respect, we don't need an excuse to go to war with anybody. If you haven't paid any attention to U.S. foreign policy, if we want to kill people, we just start killing them. We don't say, oh, you know what? I better murder a whole bunch of Americans so I have an excuse to go out there and attack Iraq. No, you just attack Iraq because nobody's going to call you on it. You just do it.
Yeah, no, I had a friend, a very good friend, who he was all about the in plain sight and all these videos and stuff. And we both live in New York, and he was like, well, so it was a missile that hit the World Trade Center. I'm like, dude, there are thousands of eyewitnesses who saw the planes go, and not to mention there's video. But it's like, we know, and I'm like, okay, so if you're telling me it was missiles, I'm like, so riddle me this. Where are the two planes and the passengers? Where are they? And he's like, I don't know. He goes, that's for the official story to answer. I'm like, the official story did answer it. It's up to you as the person with the alternative explanation to tell me. I'm like, so you're going to tell me someday we're going to find the two planes at the bottom of the sea? He goes, maybe. And I'm like, okay, God. I can't talk about this,
There's a question from Reed. Why didn't Alfreda Bukowski and her husband, Mike Scheuer, not share info with the FBI, Soufan and O'Neill? Ali Soufan was a GS-12 translator.
You should explain who these people are.
Sure. Alfreda Bukowski was the deputy director of Alex Station, which was the Osama bin Laden unit. She was actually my first line boss. I was the head of the counterintelligence branch in Alex Station. Mike Scheuer had been the founder of Alex Station. It's actually named after his son, Alec. But Mike was stripped of all of his authority and he just kind of sat in a cubicle about 10 feet away from me. Ali Soufan, an FBI translator, he was just a GS-12 nobody. He was a nobody until he started to interrogate Abu Zubaydah a year and a half later. So Ali would have been lucky just to have the Washington Post shared with him, let alone secrets from Alex Station. John O'Neill had already retired from the FBI on 9/11. He was the FBI's New York field office special agent in charge, and that carried with it also the title of deputy director of the FBI. It was broader than that, Reed. It was broader and deeper, actually. People don't fully understand, I think, the depth of the hatred between the CIA and the FBI, to the point where they allowed 3,000 Americans to die on one day, just because they hated each other so much. So to me, that's more bureaucratic infighting leading to something terrible than a conspiracy that demands an answer. Building 7 demands an answer. What nonsense says, any thoughts on Building 7? I have my own.
So do I. Go ahead. Oh, John, you're kind of frozen. John, you are frozen. Okay, hopefully that will be resolved. John, if you can hear me, please reboot, or maybe it'll just resolve. But Robbie,
I'm back.
You're back. Yeah, it's
like a bad penny.
Well, I don't even know what a bad penny. How's a penny bad? A penny's always worth a cent.
Well, because if it's tails, not heads, no, then it's bad luck.
So there's
the old
John.
live saying goes. Hey, he's back.
Okay, all right. Hey, John, bye, Robbie.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so sorry, that was rude. We'll bring Robbie back. So, all right, I want to hear your thoughts about Building 7, World Trade Center on 9/11. I have thoughts too. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that the building became structurally unsound when the other towers came down, and even though it wasn't, plus the explosion from the reserve fuel thing in the sub basement would have done it in.
That's exactly that's my take exactly. Yeah, I mean, people don't understand who are not from New York or haven't been to New York. I mean, so these buildings were immense, right? 110-story building is basically a quarter of a mile high. There were 2 of them. When they came down, they created a seismic incident that was registered on earthquake monitoring devices 100 miles away. So it all came down all at once. It was a lot of weight. The building 7 World Trade was right across the street.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, and it was a much smaller building. So the shock had to have been profound. And it had this giant fuel tank right in the middle of it that, like, you know, basically caught fire. You know, I mean, that's what I think happened there. I don't think it's a big mystery.
I don't either. I want to add something. I'm going to speak at an event next week. What's it called? It's whatever this. It's this conference in DC about 9/11. And, you know, just between us girls, I'll tell you the truth. A buddy of mine is doing PR for it. And he said, hey, do you mind speaking to a group on the anniversary of 9/11? I can give you $500. I said, okay, sure. I could use $500. I'll speak to your group on 9/11, not realizing that it's a 9/11 truth organization. So I thought, damn it. Now I've committed to this group and they're advertising and everything, and I'm kind of stuck. So I decided, no, you know what? The truth is, I also have questions about 9/11. I'm not going to walk away from my long held positions that Al Qaeda did 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
It did. I watched it unfold in slow motion in the 2 months before the attacks. Al Qaeda did 9/11. It wasn't the Bush family. It wasn't the Jews. It wasn't the Israeli government. It wasn't the Saudi royal family or the lizard people or the space aliens or Shel Silverstein. It's not Shel Silverstein or Silverman or whatever the hell his name is.
Poor Shel Silverstein.
I know. I love Shel Silverstein. Whatever the owner of the World Trade Center, whatever his name is, Silverberg, I don't know. And his, you know, insurance claim. No. Al Qaeda did 9/11. The question I have, though, is surely the Israelis, as great an intelligence apparatus as they have, knew something was coming. And indeed, George Tenet, Dick Clark, Cofer Black were shouting from the rooftops, something terrible is going to happen. We don't know when and we don't know where, but we know it's going to be an attack the scale of which we have never seen. The Israelis never offered us one sentence of intelligence to protect ourselves. Why? Because they had a national interest in the United States being attacked, because they knew that our response would be to go to war and kill as many Muslims as we possibly could. And that's exactly what happened. So I would like to know the
So
truth.
you think they sat on their hands?
I do. I think they sat on their hands. On July 6th, 2001, I was entertaining a group of mid-level representatives from a Middle Eastern intelligence service. We used to do this literally every single day. And what we would do is I'd set up a day of briefings, and, you know, they get a briefing on Hezbollah, get a briefing on Al Qaeda, get a briefing on this issue and that issue and the other issue. You take them to lunch, you take them up to the director's office, they shake his hand, they get a picture together, we exchange gifts. I take them home to the hotel, and then that night we go out to Capitol Grill and have an expensive steak. And then you do the whole thing again the next day. So I had scheduled a 1-hour briefing with a junior, like 25-year-old junior Al Qaeda analyst from the Counterterrorist Center. And when it came time for the briefing, Cofer Black himself walks in with Alfreda Bukowski. And I stood up and I said, gentlemen, this is Cofer Black. He's the director of counterterrorism for the CIA. This is the chief of Alex Station, etc. And he sits down and he says, something terrible is going to happen. We don't know when, we don't know where, but it's going to be on an unprecedented scale. I've told the story 1,000 times. He says, I beg you, if you have any sources inside Al Qaeda, please help us. Well, these guys aren't dealing with Al Qaeda. They don't have an Al Qaeda problem in their country. And so they just sat there like this, like, sorry to hear this, but we can't help you.
Sucks to be you.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, I walked over to Cofer's office and I went in and I said, Cofer, I wanted to thank you for taking the time to come to talk to these guys today. But I got to ask you, I'm not working on Al-Qaeda on a day-to-day basis. Were you saying that for their benefit, or were you serious? And he said, oh, I was deadly serious. Something terrible is going to happen. Okay, well, if the Israelis have the best intelligence service in the world, or at least the best intelligence service in the Middle East, and they actually do cover these issues, why did the Israelis never tell us that something terrible was going to happen? They never said a word. And remind me to come back to Stephen Victor Andrews. He's mentioning Susan Lindauer and Sibel Edmonds. And you know what? I'm going to go back. Hey, if a warning filtered down to me, a nobody, then a lot of people were warned. Yeah, well, there you go.
John, hold that thought. Let me read a quick ad here. Got to do it. Here we go. The countdown is over. The rivalries are real, and the road to the championship begins on August 23rd. Westwood One Sports brings you every electrifying moment of NCAA football, from the first snap to the final whistle. Top teams, big plays, unforgettable Sundays. Don't miss a second of the action. Listen to NCAA football on rumble.com, the Westwood One Sports app, on westwoodonesports.com, via Westwood One station streams, or by asking Alexa to open Westwood One Sports. If it's sports, it's on Westwood One.
I'm just about sold on that app. I've listened to you do that ad a half a dozen times. I'm thinking, you know what? That sounds like a pretty cool app.
That's hilarious. In the 70s, they used to say if you heard the same ad 26 times, you would end up buying it. John, we have I know we're at risk of running long, and I don't want that to happen, but I also don't want to miss talking about some key things here. So where was this that I wanted? So one question that we had was, I can't find it right now, but I definitely want to talk about the this MK Ultra story.
Yeah, I don't know why this is making the rounds again.
Somehow it went viral on Reddit and then spread across the internet writ large. Breaking news. So I guess history. We live in a country where history is breaking news. So I'm not going to get into what MK Ultra is, although you can explain what that is. But basically, Operation Midnight Climax is pretty funny. So basically, the question was, and this is true, this happened, right? So back in the 1950s, and so in the 1960s, the CIA set up a brothel in San Francisco, and they dosed unsuspecting Johns with acid, and they basically watched them through the two-way mirrors to see what they would do. And there were Senate hearings about this, headed by Senator Ted Kennedy in 1977 to get into all this, and it was called Operation Midnight Climax. And Snopes was asked to weigh in. Is this true?
Yes.
It's true.
Yeah, I've written about this, and I did an episode of my TV show about it like 4 years ago or something like that. This happened in the 1950s through the 1960s. It was a sub-operation of MK Ultra, Operation Midnight Climax. It was also called MK Chickwit, and the CIA was experimenting with LSD on unsuspecting American citizens, people who never gave consent to be dosed with LSD. And as one of the sub-operations of MK Ultra, the CIA rented a house in San Francisco, turned it into a brothel, recruited prostitutes, and got them to bring their Johns back to the safe house where they were surreptitiously dosed with LSD. And then CIA officers would try to get them to disclose their deepest, darkest secrets, just to see if they would do it under the effect of LSD.
They were really interested in truth serums, right?
It was like a truth serum experiment. Correct.
Is there such a thing as a truth serum, really? My understanding is that there isn't.
No, not really. Another thing they did also in San Francisco as part of MK Ultra early on is they waited for a particularly foggy day where the air is very heavy. And then they went around spraying this germ that they had developed just to see if everybody would get sick. right? Because they wanted to do this in Pyongyang or Moscow.
They did something similar in New York City. They dropped a light bulb with that germ off the back of a subway to see how quickly it would spread.
Well, 11 people came down with this really rare upper respiratory infection. And so they declared the operation a success.
I remember, I don't know if it was in New York or if it was there, but one like a grandpa died. He was like, he got that respiratory infection. I found it. It's a Phrasmataz question. TWA Flight 800.
Yeah.
What do you think? That Pierre Salinger was convinced that it was accidentally fired U.S. There were U.S. Navy training operations going on in that area near JFK Airport, and it went down like sort of eastern Long Island, not quite at the Hamptons, but like on the way to the Hamptons, sort of your typical flight to Paris. And is it possible that like the plane, like the Iranian jet that was shot down accidentally by the Navy in the Persian Gulf, that it was an accidental missile firing?
I think it's possible. And, this is not something that came out, 10 years after the fact. This is something that came out within days of the crash of that plane. And, all we ended up getting was even days after the accusation was a statement from the Navy saying, no, we weren't doing operations in that area. Take our word for it.
And there was a witness. There was a guy flying a private plane who claimed to have seen, and he was a vet. He claimed to have seen the contrail come up from the Navy ship.
Yes,
and he seemed to be a credible person who didn't have any history of like wackadoodle behavior.
Yeah, and for those of our listeners and viewers who don't know who Pierre Salinger was, he was one of the most highly respected journalists that ever came out of this country.
He was JFK's press secretary.
John F. Kennedy named him press secretary because he was so highly respected.
He was the head of the Paris bureau of the International Herald Tribune.
That's right.
And the New York Times.
This guy was a very serious, high-level journalist.
He was a colossus.
Not somebody who would normally just spout some kind of nonsense from a single source.
By the way, if you remember, so right after this happened, for some reason, that's when you had to start taking your packages to the post office teller to have them. You couldn't drop a small package in a mailbox anymore.
That's right.
And then they instituted those like tight, narrow slots instead, so that you couldn't open the thing all the way. All because of TWA Flight 800. I'm like, but if it was a fuel line problem, why can't we drop our packages in the mail anymore?
Yeah, that's right.
So all very confusing. John, I got to ask you we got to talk about this before we go. So China recently, so the Chinese the Shanghai Cooperation Organization just had its big meeting, big blowout with President Kim of North Korea, obviously the host President Xi of China, of course President Putin of Russia. That's where the headlines were. I took careful note, though, of the fact that President Xi and China, for the first time ever, are trying to sort of share the glory of defeating fascism in World War II with Russia and the United States. And I'm kind of like, okay, but that's not what happened, right?
No.
So, I mean, I was like, China didn't ever fight the Nazis because of something called geography.
Right.
And they mixed it up with Imperial Japan, which was occupying Eastern China. But that was the Kuomintang, the KMT, the Nationalist Party. China was in the middle of a civil war. It's very complicated, right? And basically, during the 40s, these were the troops under Chiang Kai-shek, where they were the ones who were supposed to be engaging with the Japanese, occupation forces. They really weren't doing a great job, right? I mean, basically, the nationalists, like Chiang Kai-shek famously said that. How did he put it? He said the Japanese are a disease, but communism is a cancer. So he spent more time fighting the Chinese communists. The Maoists wanted to join, basically said, let's put our rivalry aside and fight the Japanese. And part of the reason the communists won is the nationalists were so corrupt and so incompetent and not interested in fighting the Japanese. And the communists like made hay out of that. And they got they won a lot of hearts and minds that way. But that doesn't mean that you personally get to claim credit. I mean, Putin must have had to really bite his tongue as the leader of a country that lost 30 million people fighting the Nazis. It's like, oh, that was us. We did that together. It's like, who's this us you're talking about?
You know, it's funny. Everybody is commenting about this today. And they're saying the same thing, Ted, that you just said, that this had to be a tough one for Putin to take. Yeah, you know, the war ended, what, 80 years ago? And is that right? Yeah, 80 years ago. I think it's a little bit late for historical revisionism.
How is, I mean, I have to admit, I've just never, this seems to be a new jam for the Chinese. I mean, are they trying to take advantage of historical ignorance on the part of Westerners and Americans specifically? And And to me, this seems like also like a way for to try to sort of, it seems like a backwards way of getting at the Taiwanese, right? Because so a lot of people who don't realize this, right? This history, right? So in 1945, right, the nationalists basically started to flee at that point. Well, Taiwan had its independence from it was a Japanese province between after the Sino-Japanese War from 1898 to the end of World War II. At the end of World War II, the Japanese surrendered it and withdrew. And for 4 years, there was an indigenous Taiwanese democratically elected government on Taiwan. Then in 1949, when the Chinese nationalists were defeated by the communists, they fled, and with the help of the U.S. Navy, stole all of the antiquities and the gold from the Chinese treasury, fled to Taiwan, and basically, the book about this is called Formosa Betrayed, if anyone is interested in reading about this. And then the ethnic Taiwanese were basically pushed out of power. There was an incident where the nationalists massacred all the intellectuals on Taiwan. It's called like the 228 incident or something like that for February 28th. And then took over and established basically this right-wing kind of authoritarian, anti-communist sort of I wouldn't say fascist, but certainly very far right-wing authoritarian regime under Chiang Kai-shek. And then Chiang Kai-shek died in the 80s, and they transitioned to peaceful democracy. And it's a weird story, but basically the KMT ran Taiwan all those years, and they're in charge now. And even though there's been opposition party has had a president for a little time after, starting in the aughts, it's still basically kind of a KMT outpost. They fly the KMT flag, the nationalist flag. So this is kind of a way of just basically sucking all the historical oomph out of the Taiwanese, isn't it?
That's exactly how I read it. Yeah. Yeah. It's just ganging up on Taiwan and using history to do it. Yes.
So is it gonna work? Might work with the Americans.
You know what? You said it before I could say it. Americans tend to be less well informed than most other global citizens. So yeah, it might work on the Americans. I mean, listen, in public school, when I was going to school, we single-handedly won the Second World War. There was barely ever any mention of the Soviet Union or the casualties that the Soviet Union
suffered. Yeah, they were an afterthought. It was like we did it all.
Sure.
Big boss Bob Ross says, to be fair though, both the Eastern Front and the Chinese Front were literal hell on earth during World War II. The Japanese used to drop fleas with plague on Chinese villages to cause pandemics. Awful shit. Yeah, that was the Japanese Imperial Army, Unit 731, they were called, and They did human experiments on living people. They did vivisection. They froze people to death on purpose. And yeah, they dropped plague virus and anthrax in Manchuria.
Yeah, they did, which they called Manchukuo. They annexed it.
Yeah, probably the most pop history way for Americans to understand that is if you watch The Last Emperor, Bertolucci film, great movie, and you know, the Last Emperor of China was coerced, was kind of seduced by the Japanese into becoming the Vichy puppet ruler of Manchukuo under Japanese occupation. And although I always think for Americans who watch that movie, do they have any idea what's going on?
No.
Or is it just pretty?
They say, oh, this poor guy, he was the king of China. Now he's just a gardener.
Yeah. He was a turd.
Yeah, he was. He deserved to, you know, have his head chopped off. But
I think the Chinese were extremely merciful.
I think so too.
I mean, he wouldn't have, if it were up to Comrade Rall, things would not have gone that well for him.
I'm with you.
All right, then. Anything else we have to talk about here? Unit of 731 lived free until his death. That was crazy. I didn't know that, Manya. I guess that's right. Yeah. And let's see. Do we have to talk about? I guess that's it. I'm going to check the Rumble feed here. Okay. U.S. Oversight Committee says NPC 3 releases all subpoenaed documents from the DOJ released related to Epstein. Devil's always in the details, or the lack thereof.
President Trump says the U.S. military strike on a vessel in the Southern Caribbean targeted Venezuela's Tren de Agua gang, killed 11 people. And the Greek government just announced draconian prison sentences for anybody denied refugee status who does not leave immediately. Trump's going to love that.
Never a dull moment on DeProgram, John.
Say that.
Thanks for running long. You've got to get to sleep.
We're going to be an hour late tomorrow, and it's all my fault.
Well, it's the fault of the airline. But okay, so everyone, yes, thanks, John, for that reminder. Normally we're here 5 o'clock Monday through Friday, but tomorrow, Wednesday, September 3rd, we will be here at 6 p.m. Eastern time, 1 hour later than usual, but it'll all be the same show, and John will be back stateside, so that'll be good to see him there. Thanks, everyone. Please like, follow, and share the show. Thank you for your generous donations. Please liking and follow. Please, thanks for everything, and we'll see you tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern.
See you tomorrow.